Welcome to the Alain Guillot podcast, the podcast about life, leadership, and money matters. Our guest today is Kim Scott. Kim was a CEO coach at Dropbox, Qualtrics, Twitter, and other tech companies. She was a member of the faculty at Apple University, and she led operation teams for AdSense, YouTube, and DoubleClick. She's the author of 5 books, and today we will speak about her latest book, Just Work, Get Shit Done Fast and Fair. Kim, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here.
So, Kim, in your book, I'm gonna ask you about your background, but I have to admit something to you. You speak about prejudice, and I had to admit that I have one of them. From your book, you study Russian literature, and I always thought that people who study literature, art, things like that, they were either too rich or they just didn't care about money at all, so they didn't have the need to work for a living. So that's my bias. I'm sorry, I studied finance and I just wanted to make money, and I just always thought, my girlfriend used to study anthropology, and I said,
Uh-huh.
oh, what are you doing that for? I mean, that doesn't make any money. So that's my disclosure.
That's all right. It's not an unusual prejudice. And in fact, when I was working at Apple, one of the things that Steve Jobs used to say is that Apple's success happens at the intersection of technology and the liberal arts. So I think studying literature is a great way to sort of develop empathy for other people and become a great manager, great
Right.
leader.
Okay. So let's go start with that. Why or how is it that you ended up studying Russian literature?
That I could talk about that for the rest of our podcast. So I started studying Russian literature because when I was a senior in high school, I got invited to a U.S. Air Force trip out to Omaha, Nebraska, to Strategic Air Command, where a general explained to us why it was important to be able to blow the world up 5 times. Once was not enough. And I thought, this can't be right. And so I decided that I would study Russian literature and American literature and try to understand the cultural miscommunication that caused us to create the Cold War. And then my senior year in college, the Berlin Wall fell and the problem was solved. So
Wow. Okay.
it's very,
Okay. Well, you open your book with an unfortunate event. You suffer for some sexual harassment, or you suffer some difficult situations at your jobs. Do you mind covering that stage of your life?
Sure, absolutely. So, in my first job out of college, or my first sort of paying job out of college, I should say, I was working for a financial management company in Moscow. It was what was then the Soviet Union. And I experienced one of the things that I try to do in Just Work is to break down the problems that we experience, the problem of workplace injustice, into its component parts. So bias, prejudice, bullying, discrimination, harassment, and physical violations. And I would say I experienced all of those in my first job. Everything from sort of bias, which was sort of being referred to as little girl, not just girl, but little girl, to sort of being excluded from meetings that were happening in the sauna naked with a bunch of men, which I was not going to go to those meetings, obviously. To getting groped by my boss's boss on an elevator. So I experienced all of these things, and it was so. By the end of this experience, I was sort of I was also dramatically underpaid. So I was so angry but I was also a little bit in denial about the things that were happening. And at a certain point, I just quit and got another job, which was, not a bad response to these things. But it took me another, 20 plus years to sort of come to grips with what happened and what I might have done differently and what the leaders at that company might have done differently to create a better work environment. One of the things that was striking was that in the next job I had, where I was paid fairly, and I didn't experience all those things, I created enormous value for for the company. I wound up building a big business. And so I can argue that creating a more just work environment was actually an incredible investment for that company, because I brought in a lot of revenue for them.
Right. So the sexual misconduct that you went through, from my point of view, is the most common sin. I mean, I come from a macho country, and that is so common that bosses touching inappropriately
Yeah.
their secretaries, whoever. However, and I've been extremely surprised. I had two guests in my podcast, female, and one of them wrote a book called Sexual Intelligence. And she's claiming in her book that you have to kind of play that femininity to your advantage. If you are white, beautiful, whatever, then there is a way that you can use that to your advantage to propel your career forward. And I don't agree with that point of view, but what makes me realize is that that is a point of view that also exists out there. And I wonder if you had any comments about that.
It's not, it wouldn't be the path that I would choose. I always wanted, it was very important for me that my work get respected for the work's sake, not for, this is even true, I find, of being an author. Like I want people to read the book and focus on the ideas on the book, not to focus on me, Kim Scott. I want the work to stand on its own feet. Having said that, there have been several instances where I was invited to speak at a conference, for example, and it was pretty clear to me that the reason that they were inviting me to speak, usually pretty close to the conference happening, is that they all of a sudden realized, oh no, we don't have any women speaking, and they're in a panic. And my approach to that situation is just to charge a little extra to solve their problem for it. So, am I super proud of that way of making money? No, not really. I wish that they weren't in a panic, that they had more women. I wish I couldn't charge a premium, but am I gonna, if I can? Yeah, I will. So I don't want to throw stones at how other people conduct their careers. But I will say that a very early experience I had as a child was watching the mother of a friend of mine sort of flirt with a man at a bank. And I thought, I am never, ever, ever going to flirt to get what I need and deserve. That's just not the way I'm going to do it. But, that may be because I'm not a very good flirt. So.
Okay, well, then let's go back to the subject of the book. Somehow you made a transition from Russian literature to technology. Can you just take us how you made that jump?
Yes. So I moved to Moscow after college, and wound up working for this financial management company that was investing in Soviet factories that were converting from military to civilian production. So that was interesting. And then the first coup in 1991 against Gorbachev happened, and they pulled the money out of Russia and went to China. But I wanted to stay in Moscow, and I wound up starting up a diamond cutting factory, as one does when you're 22. And that happened. I got that job through a friend of a friend. And it was really, that was my first management experience, actually hiring these workers and then managing them. And that was when I realized that a big part of management is about caring personally, as I talk about in Radical Candor, about giving a damn. And that was when I realized that management was actually interesting and meaningful and not just about making money. That a big part of what made me read Russian literature was trying to understand what creates the conditions in one culture for things to, I'm going to pause for a second because there's a whistle, and I'm going to just crack this door open and it'll go away. Sorry, the heat came on. So what are the things in one culture that allow people to be productive and happy? And what are the things in another culture that create what I call in just words sort of brutal ineffectiveness? And so that now all of a sudden I realized that management was a way to create a better environment where people could do their best work and enjoy doing their best work and enjoy each other working together. And that led me to go to business school. Also, the fact that business school was the shortest next degree I could get. Law school was 3 years, business school was only 2. And when I was at business school, the Yahoo IPO happened. And that got my attention. This seemed like a whole other revolution. So it was kind of the communication revolution / the internet was just starting. And I wound up going to work at, this seems contrarian way to go, but I went to work for the federal government, for the Federal Communications Commission. I was definitely the only person in my business school class to do that. But it seemed like a good place to really try to understand what was going on with this new world. And indeed, I spent a lot of time getting to understand voice over IP, internet telephony, as we called it back then in the dark ages. And I wound up going to work for a voice over IP company after leaving the federal government. So that was kind of the beginning entree into tech.
Well, I also had to understand about the way that you manage people in, okay, so you have been CEO coach of this in these companies where I assume the CEO have big egos, as one does when you're one is a CEO, and you are a small woman. I just just to continue talking about physical characteristics, how does a CEO of a company takes you seriously when you say, okay, so I'm a woman, I study Russian literature, now you have an MBA, still it seems like a more Navy SEAL, someone from the Navy SEAL could step up into this character of a coach rather than you.
Well, sometimes they do. The way it happened for me was after working at a few failed startups, I wound up taking a job at Google, which worked out much better. And at Google, I was leading the AdSense business, and then as Google acquired YouTube and DoubleClick, I was managing parts of the online sales and operations team for those businesses as well. And in that capacity, I was able to grow revenue, 10x. I built a big business at Google. Right. And that, as I said, the work speaks for itself. That got people's attention. And one of the people who I worked with at Google was Dick Costolo, who became the CEO of Twitter. And by the time he became the CEO at Twitter, I was working at Apple, and I was developing this course, Managing at Apple. And Dick invited me to spend a weekend helping him develop Managing at Twitter. And lo and behold, Managing at Twitter looked a lot like Managing at Apple. The kind of principles that I was beginning to develop, and these, I explain in Radical Candor in the book I wrote later. But I enjoyed working with Dick, and I think Dick enjoyed working with me on this course, which he then went off to teach. And his board suggested that he find a coach, and he talked to a lot of these Navy SEAL type of coaches. And he called me and he said, Kim, I think you have, I like talking to you about management issues, and we seem to be more on the same page. So why don't you become my coach? And so it was, in part because we had worked together for a long time at Google, and he saw me as an operating leader, and then he also saw me helping him learn how to teach management. So then he mentioned to some people that I was his coach, and then once you're the coach of the CEO of Twitter, a lot of people want you to be their
Right.
coach.
Okay.
So that was how it happened.
Then let's go into the topic of bullying, and which is a topic that you cover in your book. First of all, can you share how do we store bullying? And bullying starts very early in age.
Yes.
I confess this to my audience many times ago. When I was a teenager, I was also a bully myself. And one time I got into a fight with a kid because he was perceived to be gay, and me as a bully, I had a fight with him because that was the thing to do. So I've been a bully, and I have apologized 1,000 times for those actions of the past. But it's something that goes on in the workplace. When you are a teenager, then you go into the workplace and people continue being bullies. And how do you stop them?
Yes. So, a couple of things to say about bullying. One is that it's really useful to distinguish in your mind the difference between bias, prejudice, and bullying. And so I want to offer some simple definitions, and then we'll go deep on bullying. Bias is sort of not meaning it. These are the unconscious stereotypes, the unconscious patterns that we have that we may not be aware of, and that when we become aware of them, we want to change them. So that's bias. Prejudice, however, is meaning it. These are consciously held beliefs that we will dig our heels in and say, oh, but that's true. And then bullying doesn't include any beliefs at all. Bullying is just meaning harm to someone else. And thank you for sharing your stories of being a bully. I mean, I also share some stories in the book about times when I bullied people that I regret. I don't intend to be a bully, but sometimes I am. So, but before we talk about how to recognize it in yourself, let's talk about what to do when you are the person who's being bullied, or you notice someone else being bullied and you want to be an upstander. So I think in the case of bias, I recommend an I statement. An I statement invites someone in to understand things from your perspective. But in the case of bullying, I recommend a you statement, responding with a you statement. You can't talk to me like that, or what's going on for you here? Why are you talking to me like that? And I learned this from my daughter, actually, when she was in third grade. She was getting bullied on the playground, and I was advising her to use an I statement, a mistake that adults often make with kids. So I was saying, tell this kid, I feel sad when you blah, blah, blah. And she bangs her fist on the table and she said, Mom, he is trying to make me feel sad. Why would I tell him he succeeded? And I thought, yes, that's a really good question. Why would you? So you don't want to make yourself vulnerable to a bully or invite them in. What you want to do is push them away. And a you statement sort of pushes the other person away a little bit. And if saying you can't talk to me like that, or what's going on for you here, if that seems like it might escalate to a bad place, you can even use a you statement simply to change the topic. Like, where'd you get that shirt? And that, it's not a huge thing, but now all of a sudden you're in the active stance. You're not submitting to the other person's questions. You're making them answer yours.
Wow, that's something that I do when I see some bullying around. I just change this. I can stand my own, but I just don't feel like going into
Yeah.
head-on battle. So I just switched the topic to the stock market, which
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is something that I love to talk about. But what do you do when the boss is the bullies? And in Silicon Valley, we have so many examples. We have Travis Kalanick from Uber. We
Yes.
have Adam Newman from WeWork, and even in politics, we don't want to get into politics. There are so many
Yeah.
cases of bullies.
We've got some prime examples of bullying and politics.
So in that case, when you boss the top henchman of the company is the bully, and you are getting paid a good salary, I guess you have to evaluate whether the salary is worth staying under such a person.
I think that I don't want to tell anyone what to do when they're in that situation. First, I just want to sort of say I'm sorry that's happening and offer my solidarity when this happens, because it's really hard. I mean, I one time had a boss who was such a bully and so belittling. I literally shrank half an inch. You can't, like, it has a physical, and my doctor was shocked. She's like, do you really need this job? Maybe you should, maybe it's time to quit. So the first thing I would say to do is to evaluate the cost of dealing with this bullying, because yes, you have a job, it has a big salary, but there's also, it takes a toll, a real toll. Sometimes I've talked to people who've had bosses who are bullies, they have insomnia. I talked to someone else who broke out in hives. Like, it really does take a toll. So don't dismiss the toll that it's taking on you. So do your ROI, but do a real return on investment calculation of dealing with this bully. I think it's also one of the mistakes that I made in my career, like in that first job we were talking about when I was in Russia, is I didn't look for the exit nearest me. Like, take the advice that you get on the last flight you took. Identify the exit closest to you. Very often we feel more trapped than we are. Sometimes we are really trapped. Sometimes we really can't get another job. And that's a much bigger problem. And I'll talk about dealing with that. But if you do have another option, then all of a sudden, at least when I have realized that I have another job, sometimes I actually have to go out and get one. Sometimes it's just realizing that I could go out and get one and that I have enough money to last me a couple of months until I do get another job. But when you realize that you are not trapped, it makes it much easier to confront the behavior. And then sometimes the bully is not aware of what they're doing, or they're not aware of the toll that they're taking on you. And sometimes they change their behavior. So I always feel more liberated to confront the bullying when I know that I have another option. So locate the exit nearest you. I think it's also really important to sort of document what is happening to you when you're getting bullied. One of the most insidious things about bullying is the gaslighting that goes on. And very often when I've been bullied, I start to question myself. Am I being oversensitive? Am I, maybe I just need to put up with it. And so I think what I have found when I start to document it makes me realize that it's not me, it's them. And that is useful. I think it's also really helpful to find solidarity. This is one of the things that gives me great optimism. As a result of Me Too and Black Lives Matter, people are more open in talking about their experiences with problems they've had in the workplace. And I think finding that solidarity, whether you're actually talking to someone or reading. Minda Harts just came out with a great book called Right Within, about sort of recovering from racial trauma in the workplace. I think that this can really help you figure out what you want to do about the situation. There's always the option of going to HR. I want people, if they decide to go to HR, to go with their eyes wide open. Sometimes HR will really solve the problem. I don't want to dismiss HR altogether. There are some wonderful HR leaders. Some of my great friends and mentors are HR leaders, but it also happens all too often in companies that HR is there to protect the company, not to protect the person who is being harmed at the company. So you want to make sure you have explored your exit options and documented what's going on with you and found solidarity before you go to HR, I think. And there's also the option of legal action. And, I encourage people to think about, to weigh the pros and cons of that. But it can be, because things can go badly. The legal system is rigged for the powerful, not the powerless. Unfortunately, I think everywhere in the world, definitely in Canada and the US it is, probably more so in the US than in Canada, but everywhere. And so you want to make sure that you understand the pros and cons of taking legal action. But people who have if you can afford to take legal action, I think I admire the people who do. I admire Ellen Powell, for example, who sued Kleiner Perkins and wrote about it. I think she really took one for the team when she did that. And then there's also the option of just telling your story publicly, of documenting what happened. Ifioma Azoma, who experienced racism and sexism at Pinterest, had to leave, and she was silenced by an NDA. And I so admire what she did. She went and she got the law changed. And now in the state of California, you cannot enforce people can talk about the things that happen to them, no matter what they sign. Those kinds of NDAs are no longer enforceable, which is just a tremendous, and she did it really quickly. It seemed to me really quickly. She'll probably tell you it took forever, but she really, I so admire the way that she took the pain of what happened to her and made the situation better for everyone.
Right. Okay. I guess one more question. This one is I'm not gonna take more of your time. It's about discrimination. So we are all familiarized with racial discrimination, gender discrimination, but it seems to me there is a new kind of discrimination nowadays, which is the separation from working from home and those working at the office. And there have been CEOs that quite outright says, if you want to get paid this kind of salaries from JP Morgan or Goldman Sachs says, if you want to get paid New York salaries, you have to come into the office. And so there you have two kind of salaries for the same work. And of course, if Jimmy is having coffee next to you and Lucy's working from home, maybe Jimmy is gonna be more aware of new opportunities in the company. So now there's a disbalance in the company. There's some kind of discrimination. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, it is. It's a complicated issue, but at some level, it's very simple. It is so clear that working from home worked. It was productive. And I think it's so important for leaders to create opportunities for people to have the flexibility they need to do the best work of their lives. There's another issue, which is if you live I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee, and believe me, the cost of living is way different in Memphis than it is, for example, in the Bay Area. In fact, I remember my brother bought this awesome house in Memphis, beautiful little cute house, 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom house. And I was looking to buy a house at the same time. And roughly the same house in Memphis cost $150,000, whereas in California, it cost over $1 million. So there is a very real cost of living difference. And I don't know what the answer is here. Like, do you give people the same pay for the same work, regardless of where they live, or not? I don't know. That's a hard question for me, because it's kind of, at some point, I sort of feel like wherever you are, if you're providing this much value, you should get paid this much. And maybe it's the government has to adjust for cost of living, and I don't know what to do about cost of living index.
Yeah, and it's not just the salaries. Also, some people would like to have the bigger title, not necessarily and if they are working from home, they may not be aware of the new opportunities.
So that is a leadership failure if that happens.
Yeah.
I think it is the job of leaders to make the careers accessible, whether people are working remotely or in the office. I don't believe that companies who insist that people come into the office will get the best talent. So many of the startups that I advise right now are picking off talent from these big companies because they allow people to work. So I think a new leadership talent that leaders are going to have to develop is figuring out how to manage a hybrid workforce well. And make sure that people don't get disadvantaged if they don't come into the office, because that is not the best way to get the best team.
Okay, well, Kim, I'm not going to hold you any longer. Can you tell us one more time the title of the book and where can the listeners follow your work?
So the title of the book is Just Work. I'm the author, Kim Scott, and you can buy this book anywhere you like to buy books. So if you like to go into your independent bookstore around the corner, you can get it there, or you can get it on Amazon or Barnes and Noble. Anywhere you like to buy books, the book is available. Now, the old subtitle of the book was Just Work, Get Shit Done Fast and Fair. And we got some feedback from people. They didn't like that. So the new subtitle is Just Work, How to Root Out Bias, Prejudice, and Bullying to Create a Kick-Ass Culture of Inclusion.
Right, I was confused. I was seeing the
Yeah.
two titles and
Two titles, yes. Well, there's going to be a third because it's different in the UK than it is anywhere. So anyway,
there'll be a lot of different. Follow you.
They can follow me at Kimball Scott or at Just Work Together, and you can also find out a lot more about the services we offer to help people put the ideas in the book into practice at justworktogether.com.
Kim, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.